Hello there, Cineboys to Cinemen here.
Hello there.
Hello. Just a quick little bit of grovelling, actually, before the episode begins. We'd really appreciate it if you wouldn't mind giving us a 5-star review on Spotify, or the equivalent of a 5-star review across all of the podcasting platforms that we are on, including
Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, SoundCloud, Google, or Audible.
Also, if you happen to be someone that isn't just one of our friends or family members listening out of politeness, please feel free to follow us on the Cineboys to Cinemen Instagram, which is CINEBOIS, the number 2, CINEMEN. That would be a good way to sort of keep up with what we're up to, and various little bits and pieces as well. And finally, all there's left to do is to say a huge thank you to all of our listeners for their continued support, be that friends, family, or just the randomers who stumble across us in the podcasting realm. It really, really means a lot. We're still pretty green with this sort of thing, but we absolutely love doing it, and yeah, your continued support really keeps us going, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, grovelling out of the way, on to the episode.
Cineboys to Cinemen. Questing the cinematic void.
Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 18. 18.
1-8. 10 and then an 8 after that added together.
Closing in on the 20 as well. Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Ben, announcement.
Yes, we've finally been granted an email address from the overlords at Google. It's cineboystocinemen@gmail.com. CINEBOIS 2 CINEMEN@gmail.com.
Yeah, big news.
I know.
For us.
Yeah. 18 episodes in, finally.
Yeah, it's just a way for you guys to communicate with us, you know. If you have any questions about some of the things we talked about, or you want to berate us for having shit opinions, which you're more than welcome to do, please feel free to do so.
Yeah.
I'd be amazed if we get more than one email, to be honest. So, we'll look forward to that one email.
We'll get one and it'll be like that security alert.
Yeah,
it's like signed in from another device.
Yeah. That'd be so depressing. Get really excited each time.
Yeah.
This week, Beau Is Afraid.
Yep.
Ari Asters' anxiety-fueled odyssey across America. A film that we saw in the watershed yesterday. Both of us came out of it feeling pretty mixed about it, didn't we?
I didn't really know what to think about it at the time. I didn't hate it by any stretch, but I wasn't nearly as fond of it as I was Ari Asters' previous 2 films. So, yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you. I think it's grown on me a little bit more. I sort of remember we kind of remarked to each other upon coming out of the film that when it's good, it's really fucking good.
Yep.
But it also felt quite laboured in parts and sort of quite difficult to get through.
Yeah.
Which I guess is probably Ari Aster's intention, given the film is about anxiety in all of its various guises. But yeah, no, we'll save that for the discussion. But it's interesting you mention his 2 other films, because I think this sort of prompts a broader discussion around his movies,
definitely.
around the themes and ideas that come very much to the forefront in this film.
Yep.
And also a little discussion around sort of anxious cinema.
Yeah.
Films about anxious lead characters, or have a certain anxiety around them that resonates with this viewer. We've handpicked a couple of choices of those as well, so it should be a really interesting episode.
Yeah, definitely.
I reckon.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, cool. Right, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Questing the cinematic void.
Okay then, so before we start sort of getting into the nitty-gritty of Ari Aster's work, and then of course Beau Is Afraid, we thought we'd talk through a couple of examples of anxious cinema.
Yes.
Go on, Ben, you start.
All right. You can't not mention Uncut Gems. You just can't not mention it.
No, you can't. You're absolutely right.
It's like talking about sci-fi without mentioning 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's the anxious cinema equivalent of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I like that.
Yeah, I love Uncut Gems. I've seen it about 3 times now. It's just so frenetic, and there's a clear difference because the lead character isn't really anxious. It's everything. It's the audience who's anxious because of how kind of good-natured but very, very troubled kind of lead character. He's a gambling addict, and he's so reactive. Everything is sort of building up around him, and it frequently comes to a head. Like the music really like channels that, and the cinematography is like really tight close-ups that sort of spin around, and there's conversations going on left, right, and centre. Like the sound mix is just bonkers, like absurd. And as an exercise in kind of delivering anxiety as a weird form of entertainment, it is just perfect.
Yeah, completely agree. I think the Safdie brothers are the masters of that.
Yeah.
I also think, as a brief aside, they are like, they've sort of brought New York back to the sort of cinematic forefront in a way that Scorsese did with Mean Streets.
Really? I didn't think.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
that,
even though Mean Streets isn't really actually shot in New York, a lot of it's shot in LA. But the idea of just characterizing the city.
Yeah.
I can't think of filmmakers that are as effective in doing that since the great filmmakers from the 70s and the subsequent work after that.
Maybe Spider-Man.
Oh yeah,
maybe
okay.
That. Although that was shot in LA.
There you go. You see, it's strange, isn't it? We have there's this sort of affection for the landscape of New York. Yet so many of these films, it's not even shot there.
No.
Really strange. Like Scream 6 the other day, shot in Toronto, was it?
Yeah, Toronto. I think Canada somewhere. It's tax breaks, man. Like New York is just really expensive because you have to close streets down and stuff. It's just impossible.
Yeah, really difficult. But no, I think that's really interesting. You pick up on that as sort of like the anxiety around the character, not necessarily the character being anxious himself.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're party to just an absolute car crash.
Yeah.
And the powerlessness that you feel as an audience member.
Yeah.
Is where the anxiety resides.
Yeah, it really encourages that sort of audience participation. You just want to shout at him.
Yeah.
To go, stop.
Yeah.
Please stop. You're making me feel horrific.
Yeah.
And yet it's not an unpleasant watch, I don't think. I mean, in a way, you could sort of say that it is, but it is just sort of, 500 miles an hour entertainment, and watching this character just crumble.
He's sort of slowly sliding down a mountain, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he sort of gets moments where he sort of clings on for a little bit.
Yeah.
And he might even get like maybe sort of scramble up to keep the shit metaphor going.
Yeah.
He sort of scrambles up a little bit, and then he slips again.
Yeah.
And it's there's a sense of inevitability to his situation. And it's a self-made inevitability, isn't it? Like,
completely. Yeah.
And despite that, you feel a degree of sympathy and even empathy for him on the basis of the fact he's obviously not an evil guy.
No.
He's just a person driven by impulse, as you said.
Yeah.
And that impulse has put him in this situation and continues to lead him down a darker, ever darker path. And as an audience member, you are just completely powerless to it, and you're with him for that journey, and you're with him for that ride. And I think they're just two filmmakers you can't not mention when talking about it. I mean, even
Good Time.
Good Time, thank you. Yeah, even Good Time is another exercise in building tension and anxiety.
Yeah, it's similar as well. The characters are quite similar in that. I think in Good Time he's a lot more manipulative, and you kind of want to shout at him to stop doing that and to stop sort of treating his brother this way, and to sort of. And it's always there's always a big sort of financial crutch that they have to sort of lean on and then ultimately sort of resolve in both the films, actually. And I mean, finance is a huge source of anxiety for, I'd say, pretty much everyone on the planet.
Unfortunately,
except for maybe like the Sentinelese uncontacted tribes. So I mean, to use that as a narrative device is like really clever, I think.
It also, there's a bizarre sort of juxtaposition going on with their films, I think, because I even think with their early films like Daddy Longlegs, which is this film about, have you seen Daddy Longlegs?
I've not actually, no.
It's like a film about this sort of like this well-intentioned but pretty shitty father in New York again.
Right, yeah.
And there's even like an intensity there, and he doesn't have like the stakes aren't as high, and it's not as neon drenched or as intense, but there's something like wonderfully uncinematic about the dialogue in their films that sort of juxtaposes with the sort of really, as you said, frenetic, fast-paced, sort of delirious camera moves, the intense soundtracks. Like the dialogue almost doesn't suit the styling of the films. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that makes it all the more intense because the dialogue is rooted in some semblance of reality.
Yes.
If the camera like fucking darting around everywhere, and there's like lurid colours and all that sort of thing, that is sort of really well offset by that sort of bizarre. Sort of almost kitchen sink style dialogue in some cases. Great directors to mention.
I think the way the screenplays are constructed as well, like what can go wrong does go wrong. right?
Yeah.
It's like, I always think they'd be great at making a film about a family trying to board a plane, and just having you had like a really nightmare, like a sort of a nightmare trip to an airport, and everything's just fucking going wrong. Like the plane's delayed, like you've lost your passport or your wallet, your keys, or like you didn't have travel insurance, or your visas have run out, or something like that. I imagine they would be so good at making a film about that. Just because like what can go wrong just does. Like that's just how it. And again, that contributes more to that sort of horrible, almost the anxiety drilling into your ears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up a film that I sort of forgot about until we sort of decided to focus on this subject area. Lars and the Real Girl.
Oh right, yeah. What's his name? Ryan Gosling. Yeah.
Have you seen this one?
Yeah, a while back.
Yeah.
I have seen it though.
Sort of what I love so much about this movie is how like the sort of side characters around him rally around this guy in this really bizarre circumstance that he's put himself in. Ryan Gosling plays an individual who has a schizoid personality disorder, a psychological condition in which a person shies away from others and avoiding interaction at all costs.
Okay, yeah.
So he's this shut-in. He doesn't really have many genuine emotional connections with anybody. Then one day he decides to buy a sex doll.
Yeah.
And this sex doll becomes his lover.
Yes.
Or companion, but not in the sort of seedy sense that you would typically attribute to a sex doll.
No.
Not there's anything wrong with owning a sex doll.
Well,
you have one. No. No. But it's sort of more like a crutch for him, like a companion, a life partner, someone to share his time with.
Yeah.
And the way the film makes that feel so sweet and so earnest is one of the film's great strengths.
Yeah.
Particularly impactful for me was how everyone around him in the town or village is completely sort of supportive of it.
Yeah.
And they all sort of help him through it on the advice of his psychologist that just says, look, get him through this phase and he will come out better.
Yeah.
I don't know, it sort of speaks to this idea about maybe having to like go through these journeys with these people in your own way.
Yeah.
Instead of just either sort of medicating. Of course, medication has its place.
Yeah.
We're sort of straying into territory again that we have very little idea about. But, of course, medication has its place as a form of treatment for any sort of disorder or kind of depression or anxiety. But I think there's a lot to be said for being supported by people you care about, being supported by professionals.
Yeah.
That sort of helps to establish a platform for you to sort of break out of it, break free from it.
Yeah, develop. Yeah.
Yeah, and and just be able to, in Ryan Gosling's character's case, form meaningful relationships with actual human beings, which for someone like him is so difficult to do.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's a bit different from like anxiety, but I think obviously for him, his neurological state is obviously the origin of a lot of anxiety for him.
Yeah, a lot of sort of mental illness stems from anxiety, or is a feature of anxiety of the mental condition. Almost in all cases, because it's something different from the norm, and so the society you're in is, you're not used to that behaviour or not used to those sort of tropes, and so you're going to be anxious, aren't you? Because you don't fit in. I always thought, I remember Lars and the Real Girl being a bit of a sort of taboo breaker in that respect.
Yeah.
Is it just sort of a bit like Her, another Joaquin Phoenix film, actually?
Yeah.
In the way it kind of handles humanity's relationship with technology. And that I always remember being quite surprising that it's very uncritical. I think we talked about Her in the past, actually.
Yes, I think we have, yeah.
But yeah, it's just so uncritical of a guy falling in love with an operating system. I love that, how sweet it ends up being. So similar in that respect.
Agreed, yeah. It sort of just encourages people to go off the beaten track and be a bit more open and accepting.
Yeah.
I think there's elements or moments in the film where certain characters struggle to maintain this sort of like well-meaning approach because they find it genuinely unsettling.
Yes.
And that speaks to this idea of having to confront these things head on and how difficult that is for everyone else.
Yeah.
I think there's often a reason why so many people would rather just medicate or whatever is because they don't want to have to see someone go through that or indeed be part of that journey.
Yeah,
which is in some respects understandable because it is a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
Going through a journey with someone who is suffering with some mental health issues, it's really difficult on them too.
Yeah.
So you can sort of the film sort of treats that perspective with respect.
Yeah.
But overwhelmingly favours the positive aspects of how they treat Ryan Gosling's character and how they get him through this stage in his life. And it ultimately benefits him. Obviously, it's a bit, it's a kind of rom-com-y, which I think the film plays with quite well.
Yeah.
So obviously there's like a quick resolution and everything's all right. So there's elements of that aren't quite accurate, I guess. Yeah. But I just think as a portrayal of this idea about, as I say, going off the beaten track and being more open and being less driven by perceptions of what normality is.
Yeah.
Because ultimately normality is something that's just been decided by people before you. You don't have a clue, really. So it's always best to be open to difference, and that might really have a much... I mean, I'm sort of I have to get off my soapbox in a minute, but it might have a more positive impact on those that are struggling and suffering if they go out into a world that's a bit less judgmental. And I think it's interesting that you mention her as well, because again, that's another film that treats that quite well with grace.
Yes,
and with humour too. I mean, humour's really important, as it is in Lars Real Girl. There's some really quite funny moments with the sex doll when they go out for dinner and stuff. They're sort of awkwardly eating. And I just thought I'd mention it because it's a film that I've not thought about for a long time, and in this context, it felt sort of valid.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a good pick actually. I didn't think about that one. I also wanted to kind of stray back into darker territory.
Go for it.
Every film directed by Gaspar Noé. Every film he's ever made is just so...
Into the quagmire.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, again, similar to Uncut Gems, anxiety-inducing.
So, to the extreme, though, isn't it? I mean, he really wants to fuck you up.
Yeah, it's like theatre of cruelty.
Yeah.
It's not meant to really be enjoyed, I don't think.
No.
Although I did quite enjoy Climax. The way it was shot was really quite nice.
I haven't seen it, so I'll put it on the list.
It's pretty horrendous.
I'll bump it up.
It's a real simple plot. What happens is there's a bunch of dancers rehearsing in a space, in like a big sort of warehousey space, and someone spikes their sangria with acid, and the reaction to the acid obviously differs from person to person. Some people are having like a whale of a time, and others just like start to sort of tear their eyes out. It's really, really gruesome, and similar vibe to Irreversible, and has that horrible low drone that goes. The sound, the sort of sound design in Irreversible and Climax is just, it's horrendous. I think it's a frequency which is sort of known to that pylons apparently have the same frequency. I'm not sure if there's any science behind this. It might be a bit pseudo-scientific, but it's meant to make you feel uncomfortable.
Right.
That's another reason why a lot of people report seeing ghosts on the London Underground, because it's the frequency of this sound can make you sort of auditory visual hallucinations and stuff like that.
Oh wow, okay.
So he's used this in a film. It's just like it's Gaspar Noé all over.
It is, yeah. He's not interested in placating any kind of audience impulse. He wants you to wade in the mire.
Oh my god, yeah.
Which I sort of have always admired him for, even if I find his films really difficult to get through. I haven't watched any of his films for a very long time. I sort of had a mini binge when at uni, and I thought that's sort of enough.
Oh god, yeah.
Even though that's not necessarily a reflection about how I feel about his work, because obviously it's not brainless. He knows he's doing it for a reason.
Yeah, man.
But it's hard to get through his films,
and
that's part of the reason that probably I haven't watched Climax, for that same reason, because I'm just not sure if I'm ready to step into that world again.
It's like an hour of quite interesting stuff, and then another hour of pretty like brainless nastiness. Whereas I thought Irreversible has over that is the narrative structure and the sort of one take thing. You forget it's that it's a constructed one take, so there's edits and stuff, but it's all one shot. After the editing, it all looks like one shot. And then I love how amazingly happy the ending is as well. Do you remember the ending to Irreversible?
Yeah.
It's just like lovely. There's two people in a relationship sitting in a park, but obviously you know what's coming, and that's sort of the weird it has that Memento style film structure, doesn't it? Yeah. In terms of inducing anxiety, it does so via content alone, I think, and it's filled with all sorts of gruesomeness, which I don't think we need to get into, really.
There's some pretty horrible scenes in his filmography. I guess he sort of feels like Lars von Trier would be another one of that sort of, not perhaps quite as, Antichrist, I guess.
Oh God, yeah.
But I was thinking like Melancholia.
Okay, yeah.
You know, like that sort of sense of powerlessness.
Yes.
Which I think Beau Is Afraid deals with really well, about how, you know, the sort of, if your surroundings are already quite difficult and troubling, or you're dealing with some sort of upcoming event or you know, traumatic event, anxiety has a tendency to superimpose a greater level of horror on it.
Yeah,
and make
yeah.
it worse.
Yes, completely.
Which I think is one of the great strengths, particularly of the first hour of Beau Is Afraid. But we'll get into that later on. But I sort of found myself thinking about Melancholia quite a lot in that first hour. Yeah. Von Trier is someone that is very open about his own struggles with depression, and his films are very sort of emblematic of that struggle, I think.
Oh, completely, yeah. They, I mean, Melancholia is, I think, out of the three, he got a trilogy, hasn't he? Sort of depression trilogy.
Yes.
I think it's my favourite of the three, actually, just because I like the way it handles the sci-fi element, and how it kind of, and the idea that as this planet gets closer, the Kirsten Dunst's character, her depression sort of goes away, whilst everyone else's sense of dread gets worse. It's so odd that this planet can be almost like a cure, and like it's like everything she's been feeling forever, everyone else is now experiencing. She's all of a sudden on everyone's level, because everyone is just so frantic and shocked about this like kind of world-ending event. And I love how happy she is at the end. It's just very
it's a strange ending, isn't it?
Good movie.
Yeah, it is. I love it. I think it might be one of my favourite films of his. Full stop. Actually, now I think about it.
Yeah, really interesting.
Ari Aster, then. Should we get into him? A filmmaker that sort of rode the A24 horror film wave.
Yes.
To critical acclaim. A filmmaker that I think we've talked about before in the context of horror films a couple of times.
We have, yeah.
I think we did Ennie's Men episode. He came up, I think.
Yeah, folk horror. Yeah, so Midsummer. We must have talked about that.
That's quite right. Yeah, Aster was a sort of part of this cluster of A24 filmmakers. Whose mission, it seemed, would be to make horror films that were scary, not necessarily because of, you know, a sort of formulaic approach to like violence or jump scares. You know, things of which are totally valid in the right way. But instead lacing elements of horror, or finding elements of horror, or extracting elements of horror from daily life. Be that relationships or anxiety,
family drama,
and finding like a sort of fresh sense of terror that really revitalised, I think, the horror genre. It's interesting that the themes that he started out with in Hereditary, which was his debut feature, I know he wrestled with that a lot in a few of his short films, which I've heard are quite good. I've not seen any of them, actually.
Oh yeah, it's like a student film.
But I mean, so, you know, in Hereditary right through to Beau Is Afraid, you can see a real clear line of progression. In terms of how he is dealing with very similar themes. He's presenting them in sort of different ways. But there's so much similarity. And it really feels like, sort of, as I think I alluded to in the intro, that it sort of bubbles over in Beau Is Afraid.
I think so,
Hereditary is an incredibly anxious movie.
Oh my God.
Familial difficulty, both in the sort of relatives you've lost, reflecting on the difficult relationships of, you know, parents and children, and those sort of unspoken frustrations and anger that ends up sort of manifesting into a real dread-inducing sense of sort of horror, quiet everyday horror that lingers in the walls of that house.
Oh God,
you know, like, I don't know, I think part of the reason why that film impacted me so much was because of that. You know, being party to situations like that, you know, you're all told that when you know, there's this really sort of face value approach to family, that they're family, you love them, and of course that's true. But like, the way Aster sort of like just gets under the skin of that really sort of po-faced philosophy and starts to sort of like just peel it and reveal the festering wounds within, you know. And it's not necessarily it's not like the most shocking moments of the film that chilled me the most. It's those moments, the family dinners, the stilted interactions, the sort of coldness, you know, shown between family members that are trying their best to sort of live to that idea that family is like sacred and family is perfect, and it's just clearly not the case.
No, I feel like in Hereditary, the reason why they're so miserable is they've just got bogged down in such a routine, and it's so clear they'd be doing the same thing and kind of putting on this facade for so long. You're part of a great American family, right? You must be happy. You have to, like, we've got this beautiful house, we've got plans, and then all of a sudden, you know, the death of it's her mum, isn't it? It's Toni Collette's character's mum, who's recently passed away, and it that kind of just peels back that already sort of thin guise of normalcy, and then it just goes from there, really. I mean, there's also, I mean, I think the best moment in the film is right in the middle, and I'd say best in a very loose term because it's horrific what happens. He basically accidentally kills his sister, doesn't he?
Decapitates his sister, yeah.
Smokes some weed at a party. She goes into anaphylactic shock and is trying to catch her breath out the window of his car, and just smacks into a lamppost. I was like, okay,
yeah, that was
something different there.
Yeah,
this is a different movie. Like, this is a new kind of style of horror, which, you know, and the unexpected. Really, I thought I do have slight problems with Hereditary. Where everyone seemed to love the bit where she's floating up in the air, stabbing herself in the neck. I really hated that. I was like, why? Oh, that's really needless. I thought it was really gratuitous compared to the kind of the rest of the film. I thought it actually leaned a little bit too much into convention towards the close, towards the climax.
Yeah.
So I was intrigued as to like what that blue light thing was, which is, it's like a demon, isn't it? I can't remember the name of the demon.
Yeah,
demon had a ridiculous name. Another thing I didn't like about it. I always thought the demon in The Exorcist had a ridiculous name as well. I can't remember it.
It's biblical, some kind of biblical.
Yeah. Like Pazuzu or something like that.
Oh, yeah, something like that,
Exorcist,
isn't it?
Yeah. Change the name. Stupid. Nobody talks about that. Anyway, I digress.
That's an interesting takeaway. I mean, I think one of the things I really like about Ari Aster, and I think you think about like Robert Eggers or David Robert Mitchell, and amongst a few of the other A24 horror filmmakers, is that they intertwine, you know, anxieties and themes and ideas that are very prescient or prevalent in our lives with the supernatural storylines or creatures or the kind of things you expect in a horror really well.
Yeah.
And I absolutely take your point that towards the end he sort of leans more into convention. But there's something I quite liked about that ending, even though it sort of undermined a lot of that sort of brooding thematic brilliance that had worked for like 3/4 of the film.
Yeah.
I just quite like that he just sort of like pops the lid
Right,
towards the end.
okay,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
I just think it's the same with Midsummer. Like, Midsummer is just like an even slower build up, and even more sort of tension, and even sort of like even to the point it becomes like laborious, but not in like a bad way. I don't know. It's maybe the wrong word to use, but and then he just goes fucking balls out of the bath and just does this crazy fucked up weird ending.
Oh man, I thought
completely surrenders itself to the mythology.
Yes.
That the sort of thematic weight is sort of intertwined with, which I kind of quite like. I mean, I absolutely take your point there that it is conventional.
Yeah. It worked in Midsummer for me though. Like, I love that film. It's interesting, I really love that film from start to finish. Even the director's cut, which is fucking long. It really does just hold. I thought Midsummer really held its water, and the anxiety was so kind of nuanced in the way it was presented.
Oh god, yeah.
And you know, you think about a film like, have you seen Matchstick Men? The way that handles mental health problems.
I don't think I have.
It's a Ridley Scott film about a guy who has obsessive compulsive disorder.
Oh,
but
okay.
It's so,
I can sort of half picture the poster.
Yeah. Him and Sam Rockwell like smoking cigarettes outside with palm trees, black and white. Yeah. The way that handles sort of, you know, anxiety and stuff is so just conventional and so outdated. I mean, it was made in 2002, so fair play. But I think it's interesting that since then, and you know, since the world has started to acknowledge anxiety with a little bit less like I don't know, bullishness, and more kind of, it's more accepting of it now, I think, than it was 20 years ago. Like, do you remember the phrase mental breakdown? Nobody uses that anymore. Yeah. Because people have decided, or not decided, people have like realised that there's a lot more complexity to it than they initially thought. And people aren't just a write-off anymore. And I think film, and definitely in the case of Midsummer and Hereditary, more so with Midsummer, I think, have kind of reflected that.
Yeah.
I bloody love Midsummer. I want to watch it again now because
it is great. I mean, I've only seen it. I think I've only seen it once, and that was in the cinema.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, wow, what an experience that was.
I saw it right before a funeral.
Oh wow, that must have made it all the more intense.
Strange. I mean, it's such conflicting because it was, naturally it's quite a sad time, and we went to see this film, which was not a happy movie at all. Like it is about
stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, it deals with things like death and what can happen to you afterwards, and then but I loved it at the same time. I was like weirdly refreshed by it, and I don't know. But,
what I really like about Midsummer is that it sort of showcases Aster's sort of macabre, sardonic sensibilities as well. Like he is someone that really understands humour and where to sort of pepper even the most sort of horrible, harrowing or tense moments with humour.
Yeah.
He's so good at that. And I also think the presentation of anxiety is something that helps, or not helps, as anxiety is something that dogs your worldview.
Right,
you sort of mentioned that a little bit earlier in the context of Beau Is Afraid. I think, as we said, one of the film's great strengths is the way that, when you're anxious, when you're in this headspace, the way you perceive the world around you, the news you read, even the relationships with people that you hold dear. It has such sort of sway and power in how you view those things and people.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously, Florence Pugh deserves a huge amount of credit.
God Christ, yes, she's
for
brilliant.
Her performance, because it's absolutely fantastic, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
But it's like she's just gone through this moment of just unspeakable trauma. And you get the impression she wasn't particularly. I think she was quite an anxious person before that happened.
Yeah. You can see her relationship is starting to break apart, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's like this idea that, like, the troubles of others, the troubles of your family, almost makes this sort of anxiety sort of feel like hereditary.
Yeah.
Like you inherit those anxieties on the basis of the behaviours and the anxieties of your forebears, the people before you. And it just becomes this cycle that almost sort of infects the way that you perceive your immediate environment, the people around you. And what I think Midsummer generates tension in is not only that, but the way people perceive that anxiety as well.
Yeah. Even loved ones, like her boyfriend in this case.
Who's so, he's obviously torn between like this sort of like bro laddie attitude towards women and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think some affection for her.
Yeah.
And also his own personal motivations, and and that only amps up the tension. The relationships between the characters is so masterfully done. It's so inch perfect throughout that film. My favourite scenes of the film was when they're arguing over like their sort of dissertation topic. And they're both doing the same thing.
That's right. Yeah.
I just think, fucking hell, like, it's something that in the grand scheme of everything that's going on in the movie is so sort of like small. Yeah. But it's just dialing everything up so slowly that by the end, even like a disagreement about a dissertation feels grand.
Yes,
amongst all of this fucking shit that's about to befall this group of young people.
Midsummer's always a really, I think it's the best example of Ari Aster putting stuff in the background for you to notice second, third watching. Like, second, third watching? On a second or third viewing, rather. Both her parents put, like, gas masks on and connect them to like a car exhaust and just go to bed, don't they?
Yeah.
And there's an image of that in a hedge somewhere in the film.
Right.
And it's just there. You can just see like the leaves kind of form the picture of that, and it's just in the background for you to kind of register without registering it, and to kind of get reminded of the gravity of what Florence Pugh's character must be feeling, and it's filled with that kind of stuff, that kind of imagery in the background, and
it's so textured, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not done in that kind of E.T. in the Phantom Menace kind of way. It's not like, remember this? It's like it really means something to the plot, and like, that kind of visual cue. He does that so well. There's a few instances in Beau Is Afraid which I quite admired as well. I sort of picked up on. Yeah,
he's he really is very considered in his approach. And it's not just about performance or camera movement or anything like that. As you say, it's that sort of the background action, the activities of other characters, or these little images that he dots around. Yeah, it's all about sort of completely submerging you in the themes and ideas of the film. It's interesting though, because this is a bit of an aside, but when we talk about this A24 horror movement of like slower paced horror movies, they're really quite divisive.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, so many people are conditioned by these sort of like found footage or like possession movies that are out that have got a very sort of set formula and approach. Don't be wrong, there can be some good ones. I'm not saying there isn't. But like, this idea that, that horror films don't have to sort of like instantly satisfy your expectation. It's not like you being gratified. You actually have to suffer to get to these points.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's why when I think about my sort of negative opinions on aspects of Beau Is Afraid, it sort of cushions them a little bit.
Right, okay.
Because I think about it in the context of Midsommar, which is a difficult movie to get through.
Yeah.
Deliberately so. And I wonder, I'm not saying it necessarily means that Beau Is Afraid gets away with it.
Yeah.
But I think that Aster submerging his films in his themes and ideas, which are deeply rooted in us, deeply rooted in all the viewers, and then elongating it over this long plot.
Yeah.
I don't know, it sort of feels like quite an interesting device.
Yeah, also, I mean, definitely will warrant a rewatch.
I think so. If we find the time.
Yeah, Christ, yeah. Maybe spread over a couple of evenings.
Yes.
But yeah, no, you're totally right. Actually, the second watch of Midsommar, the second watch of Hereditary, actually, I was a lot more on board with both of those films on a rewatch.
Okay.
Even though I really enjoyed them, both of them, the first time round, which is what worries me about Beau Is Afraid ever so slightly, because I didn't nearly as much as the other two. But that's not to say that there's some stuff in there that I might not. Maybe because I was just tired or something. I was tired or something. Yeah, it might have been it. And
we went to see it, didn't we? We were all tired with our friend Eleanor. Hello, Eleanor, if you're listening.
Yeah.
But we were all a bit knackered. In a way, it sort of made it better. It's strange. I've had a few experiences like that. I remember I went to see Tarkovsky's Solaris. They re-released it as part of the Tarkovsky season. And we were in the cinema in Derby, me and my nan actually.
Oh man!
Assuming you listen. Yeah. It was one of those summers where it was just fucking unbearably hot.
Right. Yeah.
There was no aircon in the cinema.
Oh man!
And it was like the most sweltering in heat. It's like a really long, dense Russian sci-fi, and I was like sort of coming in and out of like consciousness because it was so hot.
Oh my god!
But it sort of made the film more interesting. Like I don't know, not more interesting. That's a really quite a snobby, twatty thing to say, but it kind of made the experience of watching the film more enjoyable.
Yeah,
because you're in this sort of like heat-induced haze. Yeah, but no, so it can have an impact. But I think I don't know. There's lots to say about Beau Is Afraid, and I think we'll get into that shortly. But
yeah, definitely.
I think Aster is definitely, regardless of this film, I think this film's definitely been his most divisive in terms of splitting critics.
Yeah.
Because Midsommar and Hereditary tended to do well with critics and divided audiences more.
Yeah,
and I would
definitely
wager that's more down to what I was saying before about people having an expectation that is sort of reinforced by engaging with a certain kind of horror movie and not getting that. One criticism I read online, I'm not going to say the person who said it, and they're completely valid to say it, but he said he felt Midsommar was like a student film.
What?
Which usually but I take exception to that criticism. I think that's such a ridiculous criticism, considering how beautifully shot the film is. So.
I know, yeah, they filmed that in Sweden, I think. Or did they film it in Sweden? They filmed it in...
Probably filmed it in LA.
yeah. But to have it constantly sunny, that alone's really hard to do.
Yeah.
And also...
And also a brilliant thematic thing as well. Like the idea that horror... Because, we so often attribute horror with nighttime. Because nighttime is when we're typically at our most scared.
Yeah, and vulnerable as well.
Yeah, and vulnerable. Right? The dark conceals the dangers ahead, right?
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
But like in this case, it's in broad daylight, right in front of them.
Oh my god, yeah. The horror comes from what you can see in Midsommar.
And what you choose to obscure yourself.
Yes, yeah.
In the pursuit of like that dissertation or, I don't know, like a holiday or a sense of meaning or just a break from the horror that you're enduring in your home country.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I think like another brilliant moment in Midsommar is how he deals with, like, imagine you went to visit somewhere and you saw two people literally leap from the top of a big rock and have their skulls crushed, and you stay there. Like, on paper that's bonkers and it would alienate the vast majority of your audience. Somehow he manages to justify it and they stay there afterwards, and you're like, okay, I kind of weirdly get why they're staying here.
Yeah.
Like, she obviously objects to it, and there's a moment where they decide to like leave, but then they kind of weirdly don't. Like, there's a bit where her boyfriend goes, I'm trying to keep an open mind about this. What?
Yeah.
I just love how he somehow manages to justify that.
There's a ridiculousness that Aster completely sells well.
Yeah.
Like, and it's, again, keep saying relating to Beau Is Afraid, but in the first hour of Beau Is Afraid, there's a ridiculousness that he sells so well. I don't know, it's just everything just feels so heightened to the point that you accept the sort of silliness of it. There is a real silliness to it, a sort of thrilling, and even it's thrilling in the sense that it adds to the tension as well.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I agree. And it also might boil down to what we were talking about before in our last episode, or 2 episodes ago, sorry, which is that cultural difference. You know, that sort of fear of not wanting to offend, even if you see something that is as fucking horrible as that. I mean, I think most people could be forgiven for wanting to leave upon seeing that, but maybe that could be an element of it. And in the world that Aster has created, that sort of feels valid.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So then, we keep mentioning it a lot. Let's move on to the film itself.
Yes.
So we sort of said in our outro that we felt it was going to be like a big sprawling American novel, like a Thomas Pynchon or Don DeLillo novel or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's not often that we're right in our assumptions, but we really kind of were in a way, weren't we? In terms of, not to sort of like, pat ourselves on the back too much, but it really had that vibe of a sprawling American novel that is sort of focused on one primary character, but the characters he meets and the journey that he undertakes reveal so much about the sort of the country that he inhabits, or the country that he is travelling through.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I thought the way it deals with that scattered narrative, and it sort of invites you to pick the pieces up, but part of me really actually didn't like that because it made me feel stupid. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was watching it and I was just like, am I meant to be understanding the through line here? If it's mental illness, I'm getting it. Cool, I'm on board with that. I like how you're dealing with that. If it's not, I'm a bit lost. And is that me? Am I just not clever enough to decipher your big kind of statement piece, or is this just not as clever as you're making it out to be? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Start with the negatives. There's a lot to love about this film, but yeah, it did make me feel a bit like an idiot. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's a film that will reward with more viewings, like his other movies.
Yeah.
And I think it's not ridiculous to come away from a viewing of a film like this and feel like you've missed something.
Yeah.
I think, in a way, it's testament to him as a filmmaker, not to sort of wank him off too much, but his films are so layered.
Yeah.
Even when they're the sort of most sort of convoluted and confusing and scattershot, as you say.
Yeah.
You can go back on a second viewing and start to pick apart the elements that you missed the first time round.
Yeah, completely.
Because you said, didn't you? You watched Hereditary, you watched Midsummer, and you found a greater sense of appreciation for those movies on the basis that you picked up on details you missed
the
first time round.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier to do that, particularly when you're watching a film in a cinema, when you're sharing an experience with people.
Yeah,
it's easier, you're heightened. Obviously, the shared experience of cinema going is one of the great joys of it, and in this particular example, it was one of the strengths of the film. I thought, a lot of audience engagement actually. Which is really lovely because it's rare that films do that these days.
Yeah.
To that extent, anyway.
A lot of audible laughter.
Yeah, real. Yeah. I mean, merited as well because it was hilarious.
It was really funny. Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said about that. The idea that there's something quite bold about having a film. You need a couple of watchers to sort of really sort of get it. And even then, not to get too wanky, but it's all about what you think, right? I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, I'm of the belief that making a film, or like it's like the loss of ownership. You know what I mean?
Like the death of the artist. Sort of
thing. And don't be wrong. There's lots of filmmakers that I sort of hold in really high regard and admire and will defend to the hill. So it's not that I completely, I'm not completely against the auteur theory idea, no. But like the loss of ownership, I think is also probably more important to me as a film watcher, because at the end of the day, you're showing a film to a group of individuals that have all got different reference points from their own experiences and their own lives and their own histories, and
Yeah.
So that loss of ownership theory, I think, really rings true, particularly in cases like this, where I think a lot of people are going to come away with different takeaways.
Yeah.
I think primarily, though, that it is about anxiety.
Yeah, if I were to pick a topic it was about, I'd say it was about anxiety through the fear of being judged.
Yeah.
And more specifically, I don't know if you've ever had it where someone's messaged you and you like just forget to reply and you wait a few days and they message you again. You're like, oh shit! It's like that times a million, because it's just him not ringing his mum, and then like the judgment he feels as a result of the circumstances that happen after the fact.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is where a lot of the anxiety, apart from the ridiculous scenarios he finds himself in, the sort of hijinks, especially in the first hour. A lot of it is about, just judgment, really, and the fear of being judged.
That's sort of like, and again, there's a through line through his filmography here that leads to this point, because it's got the family, the sort of hidden, quiet family dysfunctionality of Hereditary.
Yeah.
And it's got the way in which anxiety superimposes on our immediate environment and making it alien, like in Midsummer.
Yeah,
and both of these things are ramped up to 11.
Yeah.
And given like an additional layer by, I guess, the sort of focused nature of the performance, the way Aster really dials it into Joaquin Phoenix's character.
Yeah.
And how this sort of like relationship with his mum casts such a huge shadow over him and who he is. The person he is, the things he worries about, the experiences that he has not had in his life, positive ones. I mean, because of that relationship with his mum, this sort of bizarre, possessive, almost Oedipal relationship.
Completely,
with his
I got that vibe.
Yeah. Like, there's some fucked up shit going on there. That Aster doesn't directly address head on, which I think again makes it more impactful.
Yeah.
The idea that he explored in Hereditary, we talked about this idea of like how anxiety can really come from family members.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe we talked about it in the context of Midsummer as well, but how that can they can really fuck your life up, particularly parents.
I mean, I'm not speaking from experience at all here. Hello. But you can see that, through a lot of the through line in a lot of his films, and definitely in Beau Is Afraid, that it's a cautionary tale about parenting in a strange way, in that if you secularize your style of parenting, aka if you don't keep your children open to experiences and sort of let them know, hey, this is coming, adulthood is coming, you got to be ready, but you got to embrace it as well. And that is missing from the parenting style of his mum in Beau Is Afraid. And as a result, he's just so damaged, and you really feel for him, particularly his sort of attitudes around sex. And there's a sort of plot device in it whereby his mum has basically said every
man
your ancestry, every man that's preceded you in your family has died right after they've lost their virginity.
As soon as they ejaculate.
And it's going to happen to you as well. Like, that's the kind of vibe that he gets from her, and so he's just so terrified of sex, and by extension, then forming meaningful relationships. Yeah, it's just that was quite a bit of a strength, I thought, of it.
Yeah,
it's quite
and again,
sad.
It ties into that Oedipal theme, doesn't it? That sort of that control.
I want you. You're mine.
Yeah,
you're going to be mine forever.
Like, and by sort of embedding that lie deep within him, and sort of it's almost like she's cultivating these anxieties with, we know, by saying things like that to him, and really sort of taking her time and methodically constructing those anxieties within him to the point that he's almost putty in her hands, and he's sort of aware of that, and he has a lot of resentment towards her for that. So he is self-aware enough to know that she's part of the reason, a huge part of the reason that he's so fucked up. But is also completely dependent on her because of how well she's fucked him up. And I think that was, again, like you say, another real great strength of the film, and Phoenix just plays that so goddamn well. I mean, there's a sort of pathetic hilarity to his character.
Definitely.
I really think that, like, looking at life with that sort of pathetic hilarity can be quite cathartic. And in the case of Joaquin Phoenix's character, it is. And it gives a lot of sort of sympathy towards the character, a lot of empathy based on experience. as a somewhat pathetic man myself, I can relate.
Yeah.
But it's.
I don't know, I just agreed with you as well. That, yeah.
You are pathetic.
I was meant to be like, oh, no, you're right. Mate.
Yeah, you're okay, mate. No, it's fine. Don't worry. I know how you feel. Last episode. No, but there is something like inherently sort of like mopey about him.
Yeah.
Which is also sort of a bit annoying. And it's not to the detriment of the film. It's kind of deliberate that way. Like, it speaks to this idea that anxiety, living with someone with anxiety, or knowing someone that's got really intense anxiety, as sympathetic as you can be and should be, you can't always be on your A game with those people. You are going to find that level of anxiety fucking annoying to be around.
Completely, yeah.
And that almost generates attention and sort of makes you reflect more on how you deal with your own anxiety or with anxiety with others. If you're not in the right mood for it, it's fucking annoying.
Oh my God, it's exhausting.
Yeah,
it can be. And that's that's no one's fault.
No.
It's just, it's you and your situation, and if you're busy or tired or you might want to just have some time to yourself, and then the sort of anxious person, I'm sure everyone is the recipient and the instigator of this kind of thing from time to time. I'm sure I am, and I'm sure everyone is, but like, yeah, it does play with that quite well. As an audience member, you want to shout at him, and you want to, at some point, you just want to sort of grab him by the shoulders and be like, you've got to stop this because it's not healthy.
Yeah, which in turn wouldn't be helpful for him anyway.
No way, it would make it so much worse.
It is fascinating. But I also find interesting, there's like an additional layer that sort of, there's a fantasy element to him as well. Like he superimposes fantasy.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of, when you feel so powerless and you're so terrified of the immediate environment, that fantasy is almost an escape. You can imagine a better version of yourself that will do those things, more fantastical things than you ever will, and it's almost like a relief, a safe space. Yeah. So there's all of these really complicated things going with him, and I must admit, Joaquin, not I say must admit as if I'm, it pains me to say it, I love Joaquin Phoenix, but like he does such an amazing job juggling all of that really complex stuff.
He's really good at playing kind of mild-mannered characters, and everyone will probably remember him for his big bold performances like Gladiator or Joker, but you got to think of his other sort of more, I think he's a bit more dampened down in this one. Like he's the anxiety, sometimes he's very kind of like shaky, but at the same time, the way he kind of interacts with other people is quite soft, and I like the way he does that, and I like the way he plays with that. I thought that was really good. To sometimes he lets other things take the lead, and that's really, I think that's a really honourable thing to do as an actor, is to not steal every scene. And he does that really well.
That's a really good point, actually. I've not considered that about him.
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
I always thought that he's very good at that.
Yeah, and it frustrates me that people will probably think Joker's his best performance, which is fucking annoying for me because, as I've said before on this podcast, I don't like that film at all. But there's so much good stuff that he's done, like The Master. Oh my God, he's so good in that.
Really
this,
good.
Her, just to pick a few. Like, this guy's got so much good shit. I almost feel like the Joker Oscar was like a way of saying, you probably should have won this before this film.
He's really good in Signs. He's quite a gentle soul in Signs.
Like Signs.
Yeah, man, Signs. Is great film.
I remember we've said this before. I actually like Signs. But I think even when Aster dials things up to 11, he grounds those moments. So let's focus on that first hour then.
Yes.
Because I think we sort of agreed that was the best part of the film.
Yeah, I think
consistently.
so.
There were great points that followed it more sporadically from that point onwards.
There were some good moments afterwards, but the first hour
was bit just really sort of.
We were in for a treat in that first hour, weren't we?
It's just, and we just, what we do every Wednesday or Thursday when we do our podcasts, or occasionally Sunday, as we did last week.
Yes.
What we do is we'll meet up, we'll have some food, and we'll talk through what we're going to do. And I said to you, the first hour of this film reminded me of Southland Tales.
Yeah.
And you were like, mate, I've been thinking that all day.
Yeah.
Another bit of just agreeing with each other again.
Yeah.
No. But, like that first hour, it just sort of had that sort of real it really sort of caught this sort of like early 2000s paranoia, you know, like even though the film is set later than that, but it just channels that sort of like society on the precipice of considerable social change.
Yes.
Social, political, cultural change.
Yeah.
And not quite knowing what's going to happen.
No, yeah.
And Richard Kelly comes along and just tries to sort of bottle that anxiety and just sort of like shakes it to fizzing point and just empties it all over this like 2.5 hour mad, sporadically great, also pretty shit film.
Yeah.
But great, I love Southland Tales. We've defended this film before in this podcast, but it channeled that energy for me. I think Aster's version of this sort of dystopian nightmare is a little bit more condensed and focused than Southland Tales, but it really was evocative of that for me.
Yeah, completely. I actually think that where Southland Tales kind of triumphs over Beau Is Afraid is its presentation of its setting is a lot more overtly sort of science fiction, and so you buy into in Southland Tales, and you buy into a lot more of the ridiculousness. Whereas this is my kind of take on it anyway. Beau Is Afraid starts in a therapist's office, and I thought I was in for quite a placid little film. I had no idea about what was coming, and then I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it as soon as he gets chased by that heavily tattooed skinny guy. I was like, all right, this is. That you're doing that right? I'm on board with this. But I do think Southland Tales, and why at the moment I like it a little bit more, is that it ran with the I don't know what's going to happen next in every scene kind of thing a little bit more
interesting,
a little bit better. But
I kind of prefer the setting in Beau Is Afraid in the sense that it feels like everything that we know is there, but it's all just sort of like turned on its head ever so slightly. So there's like an insanity that, I don't know, like, this is going to probably just sound like a bit cynical, but, you know, I do feel that we're only a few steps away from having a society like that, where everything just goes fucking apeshit and everyone just goes bonkers, you know?
It's almost like he's got the sunglasses on from They Live throughout the film, you know what I mean?
yeah. Oh, what a film that is. I've not thought about that for a while.
It's great.
I found that really interesting. We both thought Southland Tales, very different movies, but bottle that anxiety really well.
Also, both kind of not sophomore efforts. Beau Is Afraid is his third major film, but just the idea that they've had success in such a broad way in the past, and then a studio has given them a lot of money to do whatever they want. It's the same thing, right? So you've got Richard Kelly's like, right, here we go.
I love those big swings. We were talking about that over pizza and shop bought potato salad, weren't we? But, you know, like you know, that the big swing. I just fucking love a big swing, man. I just love it when a studio's like, oh, this guy's good, give him loads. I think in Ari Asters' case, it's probably a little bit more. I mean, don't be wrong, Donnie Darko is a great movie, but like, I think in Ari Asters' case, it's probably a little bit more like more thought's gone into that. They've gone, right, this guy's sort of, he's got 2 movies. This guy's obviously around to stay. Scorsese's calling this guy one of like the great geniuses of, you know, cinema, contemporary cinema, like, you know. But like, I just love that he's just made this sort of like film, and I kind of like there's things I don't like about it because it sort of reinforces that big swing film. It can't be perfect to be a big swing film.
That's
big
true.
swing film has to have really good and some really dodgy things in it to be that.
True,
you know, like
completely.
it's really strange. But I just love that. I love that he's gone out and done this, and I just think that is part of the reason why I sort of refuse to get sort of really bogged down in my criticisms of elements of it, because I just love it.
That's true. I still have, I mean, at the moment, I could still think of a fair few
100%, but definitely too self-indulgent.
Completely.
Ari Aster's definitely blowing himself a little bit.
I
think it almost feels like he's sort of just said, I'm not going to get bogged down in the criticisms, but I'm going to do it anyway. It sort of feels like he's believing his own hype a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think his hype is justified in many ways, because he's fucking great and I love his films and I really like this one, even if there are things I'm like really unsure about. But there is that element of, look at me, you know, he's sort of doing like intellectual wheelies, I just think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about, you know, feeling like a bit of an idiot when you come out of the cinema. When I think about it in the context of what I've just said, it kind of, I can see what you mean about that being annoying, even though the revisit might reward.
And
I think there's something to that.
I think
thinking about it now.
Yeah, this is what sets it apart from Southland Tales for me is when I came out. I didn't go to see it at the cinema, but when I watched that for the first time, I didn't feel like an idiot. I knew no one else in the room knew what that film meant, so it encouraged me to go out and read about it, and that was really stimulating. But with this, I felt I kind of got the impression some people in this room are going to pretend to know what that film's about. I don't know, but maybe it was just me. But I'm going to watch it again, though. I really am. I'm actually quite looking forward to watching it again. I'll probably get it on Blu-ray or something.
Dirty boy.
Yeah. Maybe even a 4K UHD Blu-ray. Director's cut, 4 hours long.
Oh, I bet it will be as well.
Yeah.
No, I just think there's an element of that, and I admire the arrogance because I think if you're going to make a big statement film, there has to be arrogance.
Yep. They all have it. Yeah. Southland Tales is sort of a bit like that.
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
it's so pompous.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I think that it still sort of grated on me a little bit. I don't know. Like it grated on me more initially, and it's sort of like it's not quite as. Yeah, the sandpaper that's being used is not quite as harsh as it was. You know, I don't know.
Yeah. I loved the bit. There's a bit at the beginning which goes full on fantasy. And it's a play, and he kind of goes into this play, doesn't he? And really visually inventive, uses that kind of classic, almost school play, 2D cardboard cutouts of trees.
Yeah.
In the trailer, I saw it, and I was like, oh god.
Yeah, I thought that looked fucking shit.
Yeah, me too.
I was really thinking, God, every director's got to have a bit of animation in their films now.
Yeah. Actually worked though.
It did. Yeah. I eat my hat on that one.
Yeah. I thought when it actually was presented to me, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And like it was big and bold with it's like this strange narrative it strays into where he's almost imagining a simpler life, which still has a tragic element to it.
Yeah.
Where he has these 3 sons and like kind of lives off the land, doesn't he? I quite like that. Still don't know what it means. But
even
I quite
his
like
fantasies are sort of curbed by anxiety.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
Which I think is quite relatable, actually.
Yeah.
Because you sort of catch yourself. It's almost like he's catching this fantasy before it gets too far into the realms of ridiculousness. Because if it does, it will almost deepen his anxiety or deepen his depression about his current existence.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There's something to be said about retreating into a fantasy world all the time. It's probably not great for you. It just makes you realise how shit your hand is.
Yeah.
So in the real world.
So I guess to placate that, you have to introduce a certain amount of anxiety to that fantasy, don't you? To kind of bring you back.
I get the wife and the kids, but then a big typhoon kills them all.
Exactly.
It just makes you feel so much more sorry for him.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I really like the opening, the idea that anxiety breeds dystopia. I really like.
Yeah, definitely.
Superimpose this dystopian horror on the world, through sort of overconsumption of news, which is sort of fairly prevalent in the opening part of the film.
Yep, definitely.
The sort of busyness, and obviously that it's set during a period of history or near history where the wheels are coming off and society is losing its grip.
Yep.
It's done quite well. I think had the film focused on that more, it probably would have been a problem.
Yeah.
Because it did feel, like you said, I sort of agree now I think about it, it felt a little bit more superficial.
Yeah.
But in the context of the character and the themes of the film and focusing exclusively on Phoenix's, or Beau, shall we say, it really worked, I thought.
A lot of people have anxiety about urban areas, so being in a crowded city, and for anyone who's that way inclined, I don't really suffer from that. I quite enjoy them, but for anyone who is that way inclined, like it really preys on that anxiety. Because there's just crime everywhere, and there's like graffiti everywhere, and you're never safe, and you get chased or robbed or stabbed or killed or like hit by a car, or there's gonna be someone's gonna be like about to jump off the top of a building. Everything is, all of those kind of ridiculous ideas about living in a city are just presented here so in such a sort of overt way. I thought,
it's sort of kind of this is such a tenuous link, but like the Death Wish films.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? That's like how Paul Kersey sees the world. Interesting. I even after he sort of moves from that space to the family that take him in after they knock him over.
Yes.
I loved that bit. That was brilliant. He sort of moved from that sort of, like you say, that urban anxiety into sort of like the quintessential American family unit.
Yep.
High flying parents, nice house, cracks underneath immediately.
Yep.
And the horror within that is just so brilliantly drip fed.
Yeah.
You know, and
absolutely,
I loved that. I think that was almost on a par for me. It's one of my favourites.
Okay.
And both I can't remember the actors' names, but the couple.
Excellent. They're really good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Probably my two favourite performances in the film, aside from Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah. Funny enough, that the first thing that really kind of got to me in a bit of a slightly negative way was that Jeeves guy. I didn't find him that funny. I mean, for a bit I did.
It's got from the Beasts, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's strange.
As an aside, I enjoyed that, but like, I think the way they used him later on in the film was like a bit of a Deus Ex Machina kind of thing.
Right,
I was like, I don't know. It was quite funny in that the American family are sort of overly kind, aren't they? So they've taken in their sort of late son's military superior, haven't they?
Yeah, he's like his sort of like a squaddy, one of his squaddies, from this war in Venezuela.
Yeah.
Again, another implication of this sort of dystopian nightmare that's unfolding around this quiet American dream. You know?
And he's just running about all the time and panicking. That bit was like, because it was. I mean, there's a lot of silly moments in the film, but like I was like, this is all really good stuff still, and there's like the tension so palpable. But him doing this is starting to, I don't know, I'm not sure about that. And from there is when the dip started to kind of happen.
Yeah, I think that the quality of the overall experience started to wane, I think. And it started to become a bit more of a slog. But again, I can't help but think that part of it. It can't all be just delirious, comical brilliance. There's going to be these moments of prolonged, meditative, narrative stuff that's going on, and you're going to have to just like it or fucking lump it. You know? And I quite admire that about it. But I also feel that it started to get weaker. And I think where it really started to go downhill was when he got to his mum's house.
Okay,
for me, because the film is about this odyssey across America, going back to his mum's house, going back to his mum, who for a large part of the portion of the film he believes has died.
Yes.
In a tragic, classic Ari Asters style death.
Her
head is crushed by a chandelier.
Yeah.
And then, spoilers, I mean, I assume you've seen the film already, but obviously if you haven't, go and watch it or stick around, whatever. He goes back to the house, ends up having sex with a childhood fleeting romance that comes back as a woman. And then she dies, and then somehow in a sort of bizarre but quite hilarious, but sort of like, I don't know, I was a bit like, what way? And then
she freezes, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Odd. Not unfunny.
No. Again, it's that sort of macabre sensibility of Ari Aster. I just think his sense of humour is so well deployed in Midsommar.
Yeah.
Not so much in Hereditary. It's not as common in Hereditary. There is some humour to it for sure, but Midsommar is definitely where he starts to grapple with that humour and pepper it in these narratives. And in Beau Is Afraid, it's really well utilised at points, particularly like the first half, and then sparingly as the film goes on. But again, I did feel like he was believing his own hype a little bit with that. And then the mum comes back, and then it just all starts to become a little bit wishy-washy.
Yeah, a bit wet.
And I don't know, like by that point I was ready for the film to end.
Yeah, me too, man. I thought it was going to end at that house. And I was like, this must be about 3 hours now. Must be about 3 hours. This is the last scene, and he's going to, and it just didn't. And there's a lot more to get through after that. The bit in the house suffered from the same thing, and this is like literally the only thing I don't like about Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Long title.
Long film.
Yeah, quite another long film. It just the pacing is so shit. Like it does this weird thing where someone will say a sentence and then just pause and then nothing for a while, and like I don't know why. The idea is to kind of construct this sort of uncomfortable atmosphere by these long awkward pauses. It just doesn't work. It just slows the film down. I'm sorry. That was what that scene really did really badly, was the pacing just which up until that point had been all right. It just stops and it never really recovers from that.
No, I agree.
Assassination of Jesse James has all these moments where literally no one is saying anything and they're just staring at the floor. Apart from that, brilliant movie, by the way. Love that film to pieces. One of my favourites.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Like, I just think it was sort of drumming home a lot of the thematic stuff that had already been suggested pretty well throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, I
And the
agree.
mum the mum is just saying all the stuff that, you sort of get the feeling that was already all there. And
yeah.
I had to have a character to run through it all.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting to get her perspective on the relationship.
True, yeah.
And sort of explore the idea of anxiety as being and depression as quite a selfish thing. It can make you quite selfish.
Yeah,
because
no.
you're putting your anxieties and the things that make you unhappy above everyone else's.
Yeah.
And that in many cases is justifiable because you're not in the right headspace to consider how your actions are impacting others. But I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
And obviously she had a lot of her own resentment. And it sort of reminded me of the back to Hereditary, the sort of scene with Toni Collette in the table when she's having a go at her son.
Oh my god, I know what scene you mean.
That was brilliant in Hereditary.
Yeah.
Not so good here in Beau Is Afraid because again I think all the thematic work had already sort of been done.
Yeah.
But again it reminded me of that. It had that energy to it, which I quite liked.
Yeah.
Overall ends in a bit of a whimper.
Yeah, I think
thought.
So. Yeah.
Again, second viewing might change my mind, but for now, bit of a whimper of an ending.
Yeah, I think so. In all three of his films, he's got to think about like drugs and like specifically like quite soft drugs and the way that hallucinogenic drugs make people do stuff like so you got Hereditary, the most obvious instance of like he smokes a bit of weed at a party, accidentally kills his sister. But then there's a bit in Midsummer where she takes mushrooms. She takes and there's the bit near the end with her boyfriend drinking a like mushroom tea and like tripping out and going and shagging a bunch of like elderly women. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So, and then in this, there's actually quite a standout moment, I thought, when he's in the car.
That
and
was
he's
cool.
just like, I'm fairly sure Ari Aster must have like smoked some weed at one point and just had a bad time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's that sort of classic thing about anxiety, that the consumption of a drug like that when you're anxious is just not going to be any good for you.
It makes it so much
and
worse.
It sort of kind of like reaffirms that sort of nerdy patheticness to the sort of feel of the film. You know what I mean? And we've all been. I've been there.
Oh god,
I had many. And it was felt like quite relatable.
Which
I quite liked. But that is an interesting 3 point. I've not quite considered that.
Stranger Side, theme in all of his films.
Yeah, no, an interesting film. I think it's definitely, someone believing their own hype a little bit too much.
Yep.
But the swing is big, and I admire it. And what I want to know is, Ben, where does he go from here?
Oh,
because he's made 2 horror movies.
Yep.
He's made like a comedy road movie of sorts, existential road horror movie comedy thing.
Yeah.
Where does he go from here? Does he go back to his roots, or does he keep sort of dabbling with different genres? Do you think?
Oh, mate, that's a really good question. I have no idea. I don't know why that's popped into my head. Something historical. Don't know why. Could be interesting.
Eggers did it.
Yeah.
Eggers continues to work in it. I mean,
exactly.
He was a good friend of his, right? I mean, I think they have a production company together.
Do they?
Sure they do. Yeah,
I'm glad they do. That's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those 2 guys. We talk about this collection of A24 filmmakers. It's really those 2 that are the 2 big ones, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few others. I mean, obviously
David Lowry.
Like great. Yeah. It Follows.
David Robert Mitchell. Yeah.
What a film that is, by the way. Great film.
Yeah,
and he followed that up with that sort of noir film, which I've not seen, which has got quite mixed reception.
Apparently, that's a big swing as well. That looks like a big swing film. Haven't seen it. Under the Silver Lake.
That's the one.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield. I'm going to watch that because Alfie, our dear friend Alfie, I think he really liked it.
He watched it once and didn't like it.
That's
and then watched it again and really liked it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. We talk about in the context of people like Ari Aster.
In
the sense that the second viewing, not necessarily because he didn't like it the first time, but you find new appreciation. So it might be one of those.
That's very true. Yeah. Interesting.
So to summarise, really worth going to see.
I think so, yeah.
Regardless of our reservations about aspects of how he handles certain themes and ideas. And also there's a lot of it we might understand because he's, by his own admission, it's a very Jewish film.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Obviously not being Jewish, maybe there's lots of stuff that went over our heads. So,
maybe, yeah.
Anyone of that persuasion listening, email in, correct us.
Please do, yeah.
But yeah, definitely worth the watch. I think it's
so.
a film that, as an experience, we talk about this idea of audience participation. It is definitely a film for that.
Yeah, I
certainly
think
the
so.
first half.
Yeah.
And it's really refreshing for me as someone, obviously, both of us,
Yeah.
that adore this medium so much. And there's a lot of anxiety about the cinema experience, what the future of that is, given with streaming, everything like that. And films like this sort of reaffirm the power of the big screen, right?
Oh, completely, yeah.
So in order to keep that power very much alive, just go and see it. And
I think so, yeah. Definitely go see it on the big screen. It's worth it. Always is worth it.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, find a comfy seat, maybe.
And not always easy in the cinema, to be fair.
No, Christ, no, yeah.
I was sat for so long in the cinema that you sort of forget your arse just sort of ceases to exist.
Yeah.
I mean, like I got getting like, do you know when you get that and you get like a little tingle in your groin?
Yeah,
because your bum's just disappeared.
There's no blood flow to it.
Yeah, like it just felt like I was like the bottom half of my body was just sort of like disappearing.
Oh no, both my knees were just like, forget it. Like, and then like I was surrounded by like my various kind of. I had dinner in the cinema. Just bought loads of sandwiches. Surrounded by like various packets of like sandwiches and Skittles and stuff. Yeah.
That was weird. Cut it out.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely worth a pop. And I'm intrigued to see what he does next because I just don't know where he goes.
Yeah,
I think you're right. His historical epic,
Something
probable.
historical. I think so. Be a
Right.
good thing. Nice.
Outro.
Questing the cinematic void.
So there we have it then. Another scintillating exchange. Great talking about that film. Lots to unpick. Lots of stuff we've missed, given the nature of the film. But again, worth a go.
Definitely.
Anyway, next week we're gonna watch The Master Gardener.
Yes.
A really shit title.
Not great.
Not
Reminds
great.
me of that film A Good Year. In
Yeah.
fact, the poster looked quite similar as well. Like that Russell Crowe film about wine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The worst film title though is definitely Salmon Fishing in the Yemen.
Yeah, that's not great, actually.
I think it was one of my mates pointed it out, and ever since then I've just been like, that is a shit title. And it sort of always feels like that. You can imagine it being like a frothy sort of like, we talked about those like old guard sort of like rom-com-y sort of films. But it isn't. It's filmed by Paul Schrader, who is low-key one of the greatest filmmakers in American history.
Yeah.
A guy who rose to prominence as a screenwriter, most famously for Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
Pulling Scorsese out of his coke-filled nightmare and getting him to direct one of the great New York films.
Yeah, man.
It all comes around in circles.
Oh, it
There you
does,
go.
yeah.
And also responsible for many great films such as Hardcore, Mishima, A Life of 4 Chapters, and Blue Collar. And a couple of more recent examples, like The Card Counter. You talk that one up quite a lot, don't you?
Yeah, man, I really enjoyed The Card Counter.
Give that a go before we talk about the film, then.
Yeah, it's one of, I rated it 3 stars on Letterboxd, and the week after I really regretted it. So I was like, I can't stop thinking about The Card Counter and how great it was, and I gave it a pretty middling review. But there we go. Let's just not forget also Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist. Interesting story how that film was made by Paul Schrader and then remade again by someone else, Rennie Harlin, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Rennie was big for pieces.
Yeah.
You know, Schrader himself, fascinating individual, really bizarre upbringing.
Oh, yeah.
And someone that, I just think is responsible for one of the greatest films ever made, or certainly one of the greatest American films ever made.
Yeah.
Taxi Driver. And also someone that has, by his own right, made some great films.
Yeah, really good.
So I'm really looking forward to deep diving his work, and I'm really looking forward to the film, because it really sort of came out of nowhere for me.
I just saw the poster.
I was like, how do I not know this was happening?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
In the meantime, enjoy this app, enjoy
Yes.
our episodes. Feel free to get in touch with that email address again. We're not desperate.
No. If you want. You know.
Yeah, if you want, please. And have a great week. Catch
See you
you
in a
next
bit.
one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.